The main attack was diverted southwards, it is true, and yet even so, with his far-stretched right hand, Sauron could have done terrible harm in the north, while we defended Gondor, if King Brand and King Dain had not stood in his path. When you think of the great battle of Pelennor, do not forget the battle of Dale. Think of what might have been. Dragonfire and savage swords in Eriador. There might be no queen in Gondor. We might now only hope to return from the victory here to ruin and ash. But that has been averted, because I met Thorin Oakenshield one evening on the edge of spring not far from Bree. A chance meeting, as we say in Middle-earth. Hey everyone, Yoistin here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today we will take a more specific look at what happened in the Northlands of Middle-earth during the War of the Ring. While I will talk a bit about the happenings in Eriador as well, we will mostly be concerned with Rhovanion, east of the Misty Mountains. I'll link my War of the Ring video, as well as other articles and videos in the description and cards for more information. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me today. Let's begin our adventure. We'll start with Aragorn capturing Gollum in the Dead Marshes on February 1st of 3017 of the Third Age. The appendices and unfinished tales have a different date for this event, with the appendices placing it in 3017 and the unfinished tales in 3018, so take it as you will. In my mind, this began a chain of events that impacted the north. Aragorn and Gollum would make their way towards Mirkwood, where the elves of Thranduil would keep the creature. Aragorn would pass through the north, receiving aid from the Beornings as he went through Rhovanion, and word would be sent from Lorien to Gandalf of Aragorn and his burden. On March 21st of that year, Aragorn and Gollum arrived at their destination, and 2 days later, Gandalf made it there to question Gollum. After some days of dialogue, Gandalf was able to discern most of Gollum's story, and then he left. Aragorn would eventually depart as well, for both the wizard and ranger would be more needed in the west in the coming years. Indeed, as we know through the main events of The Lord of the Rings, Gandalf would tell Aragorn of Frodo and his burden, and much would happen in late 3018 through 3019 of the Third Age concerning a great doom of the world and the One Ring. But again, we are concerned more with the events of the North that are less apparent during the War of the Ring. Sometime during late 3017, a messenger would come to the dwarves of Erebor from Mordor, asking the dwarves for information on the halfling that they had known, for he possessed a stolen trinket of the Dark Lord. The messenger said if they found it, they would be given back 3 dwarven rings, as well as the realm of Moria. For only news of the halflings' survival and whereabouts, they would have friendship with Sauron and a great reward. But if they would refuse, there would be problems for the dwarves. Indeed, the dwarves of King Dain Ironfoot were loyal beyond belief, so they would not give up their dear friend Bilbo Baggins. But they bided their time, saying neither yea nor nay, and the messenger returned multiple times. King Dain sent Gloween to Rivendell to warn Bilbo and seek counsel from Elrond. It is said that King Brand of Dale also received similar messages and was afraid. Sauron would not forget this, and we will return to Erebor when we discuss the battle that came there. After Sauron's attack on Osgiliath, on June 20th of 3018, many events concerning the fate of the North were set in motion. The Nazgul would cross the Anduin due to that battle, and according to the Hunt for the Ring chapter in the Unfinished Tales, the Nazgul would spend time looking for the dwelling of the halflings in the Vales of Anduin, east of the Misty Mountains and north of Lothlorien. Indeed, Smeagol's folk had dwelt there once, as had many of the ancestors of the hobbits, but in the Nazgul's search for anything related to the Shire and Baggins, they started there, and to no avail. If any hobbits remained in that land or near to it at that time, they evaded the Nazgul, but most hobbits had removed west into Eriador, as the Nazgul would soon discover. They would return in defeat to the Wold, where messengers from Sauron would tell them to go to Isengard. In Mirkwood, around the same time as Sauron's attack on Osgiliath, which sent forth the Nazgul, around June 20th of 3018, the elves of Thranduil, watching over the imprisoned creature Gollum, were attacked by orcs, while the elves let Gollum climb in the trees. This was evidently a coordinated attack, and according to the Unfinished Tales, the idea that Gollum had been captured by Sauron's enemies alarmed the Dark Lord greatly, based on the information he had gotten from the creature, so he wished for Gollum to be recaptured. And in the process of the attack, Gollum escaped, heading into Moria to hide there until the Fellowship of the Ring passed through. Alright, now let's progress to the events that occurred after the Fellowship of the Ring departed Rivendell and began their journey. The 9 companions would go south through Eregion, pass through Khazad-dûm, and would go into Lorien, and Gollum would begin tracking them in Moria and follow them afterwards. Though Gandalf would defeat the Balrog Durin-Spain, other servants of the enemy would escape from Moria in pursuit of the Fellowship, only to be harried by the elves of Lorien on the borders of that fair realm. After the Fellowship departed south on Anduin, On February 16th of 3019, the battles were only beginning for the realms in the north, though the ring of Sauron had passed beyond the edges of their sight. In late February, Frodo would see the land of the Beornings on fire from atop Amunhen. How this came to be, I am unsure. Gwaihir the Windlord would find Gandalf atop the mountain peak of Ziarak Zigil, or Celebdil, and Gandalf would be brought back to Lorien a day after the Fellowship departed, and he would be clothed in white before he too went southward. Now it seems, based on the words that Galadriel sent for Aragorn passed to him through Gandalf, Galadriel sent word to Eriador after the Fellowship left, likely to Elrond and his sons, that the Rangers of the North, the Dúnedain, should ride to the aid of Aragorn in the south. Where now are the Dúnedain, Elisar, Elisar? Why do thy kinsfolk wander afar? Near is the hour when the lost should come forth, and the grey company ride from the north. This would cause the Rangers of the North and the sons of Elrond to ride from the north and meet Aragorn and Rohan, but in the absence of the Rangers, Eriador became rather unsafe. More ruffians and brigands would come up the road from Isengard, pouring into Breland and the Shire, and giving them free rein until the return of the hobbits to the north and the king to the throne of Arnor. Anyway, back to Rhovanion. After Gandalf and the others left Lorien, it would not be long before Dol Guldur tested the defenses of Lothlorien. On March 11th, the orcs of Dol Guldur would launch its first assault on Lothlorien, and whether or not Khamûl, the lieutenant of Dol Guldur, second to the Witch King himself, also had a part to play with this policy of war, I am unsure, for he and the other Nazgûl were also needed in the south. The Wood Elves, under the leadership of Galadriel, bearer of the Elven Ring Nenya and Celeborn, were able to repel this assault. On March 14th, the Battle of Dale began and would go until March 27th. The dwarves of Erebor, reaping the battle for turning away the messenger of Mordor, would fight alongside the men of Dale against a large army of Easterlings. King Brand would hold the forces of the Easterlings back at the Carnan River, but they pushed him back to his city of Dale. Soon men and dwarves would battle side by side at the foot of Erebor, and on March 17th, after days of fighting, King Brand fell, and King Dain Ironfoot defended the body of his friend until he too was slain. The sons of the kings, Thorin Stonehelm and Bard II, led their forces afterwards, and were forced to retreat into the Lonely Mountain during a siege. We'll come back to them in a moment. On the 15th of March, Sauron's northern forces, more orcs out of Dol Guldur, attacked Lothlorien for a second time, and also attacked the elves of Thranduil and Mirkwood during the battle under the trees. Both of these northern assaults also occurred on the same day as the Battle of the Pelennor Fields in the south, while, of course, the Battle of Dale was still happening at the same time. Sauron's forces were fighting on 4 different fronts on the same day, all while those who would do him the greatest damage were getting closer to Mount Doom. The third and final assault on Lothlorien would occur on March 22nd, and though the edges of Lorien were attacked and damaged, the elves still held strong. It is said that only had Sauron himself come there could Lothlorien have been destroyed, for the powers that dwelt therein were too great. But the battles of the north were not yet over, for the new kings, Thorin and Bard, held fast during the siege of the Lonely Mountain, and the Easterlings would only be defeated when word came out of the south of the fall of Sauron and the victory of the host of the west. The morale of the Easterlings was shattered, and the men and dwarves had a second wind, and they were able to drive their enemies back and lift the siege on March 27th, 2 days after the fall of Sauron. After the crowning of King Elisar in Gondor, Gandalf would muse on the true importance of the reclamation of Erebor and its effect on all the events of Middle-earth since it had taken place. Had the dwarves not reclaimed Erebor, Sauron would have had direct access to the free folk in the north, especially if he had been able to make an alliance with Smaug. There would have been death and ruin in the north, in Eriador, in Rivendell, in the Shire. Beyond this, all the battles that took place in the north, especially the Battle of Dale, was crucial to the victory won against Sauron in the south, for if the Easterlings had beaten the dwarves and men, or if there were not dwarves and men there to fight in the first place, they would have been able to join forces with the orcs of Dol Guldur, both against the elves of Mirkwood and Lothlorien, and against the men of Rohan and Gondor, having an established position in the north. To me, it seems that had Sauron not been spread so thin, or had he focused on doing combat in the north, things would have turned out much differently, for even so, the west barely had victory. So if Sauron had been more active in his pursuit of the ring when it was still in the north, things would have turned out far worse for our characters. It's quite fascinating to think about, all because, as Gandalf said, he happened to meet Thorin Oakenshield not far from Bree many years before. and together they had discussed the reclamation of Erebor. Well, after the battles of the north, Erebor and Dale would rebuild under their new kings. The elves, led by Celeborn and Galadriel, would cross Anduin on March 28th, and sometime before April 6th, Galadriel used her vast power to throw down Dol Guldur. Thranduil and Celeborn would meet on April 6th of 3019, the Elven New Year, to reapportion their kingdoms, creating Eren Losgallen and East Lorien. Lothlorien itself would diminish, even as the Ring Nenya and the Time of the Elves in Middle-earth did as well. In the autumn of 3019, the hobbits would return to the north, with many others of the Great in Middle-earth going also back to the north. But the hobbits themselves would liberate the Shire during the Scouring of the Shire, seeing a final end to Sauron and his plans, which I discuss more in my What Happened During the Scouring of the Shire video. And so there we have it. Because of the hard-fought battles in Valar in the north during the War of the Ring, which all were preceded by Gandalf's plans to reclaim Erebor, the West had a total and well-earned victory. And so we come to the end of our tale. From what happened in the North during the War of the Ring, we see another common theme in Tolkien's works. Many are the hands and alliances that move the world, and those that move it for good, even if in an unknown way, deserve praise and remembrance. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with your friends. What are your thoughts, questions, additions, and corrections about this tale? Let me know in the comments below. I'm really glad that I made this video, for I've been reading the Unfinished Tales recently, and it always amazes me with how much depth there is in Tolkien's works, and these events and deeds that happened in the North speak to that depth, and they are super fascinating. To further support the channel, please check out our music channel, Facebook, Twitter, merch, and Patreon for a podcast and Discord server. All of those links are in the description below. I want to shout out our Valar tier patrons: Adrian De La Tour, Chris Ortner, Peter Shepard, Jonathan Putnam, Mark Kralik, Blair Scouten, Tobias Goldner, Ryan Ramsey, Adam Rank, Merton, and John Hume. Thank you all so much. It means the world to me. Finally, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the free peoples today, and I'll see you all again next week with an updated epic character history on Lord Glorfindel of the Golden Flower. Everyone, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one, my great friends.